Let's go. YouTube video, but the warning to start with is I can be a bit boring at the best of times, and I know, because I roughly know what this video is going to be about, that this might not be interesting to some people because it's a subject that is complicated but really should be a lot more simple. I'll just go. You know, it's YouTube, you can always turn off. Right, so the start of this was, over the last few months I've been watching myself go to sleep and wake up again. I'll leave that there. And about 10 days ago somebody put a video up on the comments on my website which was interesting in connection to that. So I'll do the video first that I watched. If I find it, I'll put it down below, but I probably won't be asked. So I'll just tell you about it. There's this neurosurgeon type person in America who was talking about putting in implants in deaf people, cochlear implants maybe, something like that. That was a digital type electric modern device that then could listen. It had a microphone, it could listen and then send impulses to the brain. Now this was put into deaf people, and what happened was that it works, obviously that's why they do it, but what the deaf person gets when they first realise it's working is go and basically say, "Doc, thanks very much, I can hear something, but really you needn't have bothered," because it's when somebody's speaking to them and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Right, long story short, after about a year it's as good as any yours and mine hearing. Not quite, but I'm just exaggerating to make the point. They can hear to the extent that they understand everything. Now, I'll go on with the importance. I'll stick with this so we don't get too confused, and I'll come back and link to it again. What's coming to pass here is that the signal, obviously coming from the microphone and the output of the digital device, isn't changing. It's still sending to the brain, but the brain has found a way of working out that it actually means speaking and can understand it as speech, although it is exactly the same garbage that was in the first week after the operation. But after a year it turns that garbage into, let's say, perfect speech. Should I keep going on this or come back to it? Yeah, one more thing on this. So what is happening, and there's different ways we can describe this. The thing I want to try and avoid is always we think how we've been programmed to think is that there's a me in the brain that has information fed to it from other parts of the brain. But you've just got to forget that because it's so fundamentally wrong. But we're all programmed to think that way. Okay, so the way I do it is just go, one part of the brain is talking to another part of the brain, and then I'll say another part of the brain is talking to another part of the brain, and you can have 3, 4, 5, 3 dozen, 50, it doesn't matter how many parts of the brain are talking to another part of the brain. It just drags you out of that whole, this is me in a movie cinema and the brain is just feeding information to me, which is just wrong. So I'm not saying one part of the brain speaking to the other part of the brain, speaking to the other part of the brain, another part of the brain speaking to another part of the brain is right. It's just a way of dragging you out of the old me in a movie theatre, which is just so fundamentally wrong. Okay, so the brain has built, what should we call it? first off, I'll call it a translation unit, but this is not right. But it's first week, it hasn't built the unit, so another part of the brain is receiving the garbage. It builds a translation unit to translate it from into speech. Now, maybe later in the video I'll come back and make that a bit more accurate. Or should I try and do it now? I'd try and do it now if I could remember what I wanted to say. Okay, I'll try and come back to it. I've been looking at me while I've been falling asleep for a long while, or long years, but I've kind of concentrated on it for the last few months. Trying to work out how I can work out whether I was asleep or I wasn't. You know, somebody wakes you up and says, "Oh, were you asleep?" And you can say, you always just lie, basically. Say, "No, I wasn't asleep." And it's all to do with short-term memory. If you program yourself, and you can't actually ever program yourself, but that's another story. If it happens to arise in your life like it has in mine, that it seems like you're programming yourself, that you get right to the point of sleep where you are asleep or you're not asleep. Short-term memory is still working on what's going on in the brain. I won't talk about subconscious and conscious at this stage. I've been training myself to get right on that point of sleep, not asleep, and asking myself, were you asleep? And then getting a part of the brain to interrogate the short-term memory, empty it out and have a look. And what you get is, if it's utter nonsense, you were asleep. If it was logical sense, you were awake. Now, I've done this now, it's not thousands of times, hundreds of times, and it's always the same. Now, I'm rocking on this thing, and it's in seconds. The short-term memories may be 2 seconds. It takes a while to access it, so I'm only getting just over a second of information out of it. But it's definitely, it's of no interest, but it's vaguely interesting that what happens is, as soon as you go to sleep, your brain starts talking garbage. It's doing logical stuff when you're awake, and the moment, in fact, what it means is to be asleep, or let's just say what happens immediately that you do fall asleep, the brain goes into garbage mode, and it just doesn't make sense at all. It's like dreams. It goes into dreams mode, and words are all being used and everything like that, but when I wake myself up or get to that point, drag that out of short-term memory and look at it, and it goes, and I read it and go, that's garbage, I was asleep. Or if I do the same thing and it makes sense, I was awake. And it's that way. As soon as you go to sleep, your brain goes into garbage production mode. Now, where else would I want to go with that? Dreaming, but this gets really complicated. So, dreaming, we imagine, there's nothing, just to make sure that everyone should know, that there's nothing more boring, even than one of my videos, than somebody explaining their dreams to another person. Exceptionally boring to listen to other people's dreams. Okay, that established. What we seem to remember from dreams kind of rubber stamps the dreadfully wrong impression that we have from about the way we are, that we're in a movie theatre, and we think that at night we're still, although we're asleep, we're in a movie theatre and these dreams are played to us. Dreadfully wrong way of looking at it. But doing this, waking up and then instantly analysing what I've been dreaming about or thinking about, I find that the dream vision is incredibly bad. We remember it as being not bad at all. sometimes incredible detail? No, no. But when I say no, you've got to go with me, and this is the bit I've got to try and explain because it's very, very difficult. Okay, if you now close your eyes when you're awake, different people see different things, but basically it goes dark because you've shut your eyes, and you've got a kind of a greyness which is either separate from the dark or another thing, or I have particularly orange spots that make, they're sometimes streaky, that take up a lot of the area or a small amount of the area, or silver spots that do different things at different times. If you close your eyes and keep them closed and concentrate on what you can see, if you do it just after you've seen a white light like a screen, you'll see a square of orange probably. But if you're a silver or white type looker, you might see the square. But as soon as that fades, in other words, there's no memory replaying again on your eyelids, as it were, what you get is splodges. They're just splodges. I imagine it's the eyes, it's what the eye sees, and it's sending that information back. Now, what I can see is happening, falling in and out of sleep and being right on the edge of sleep, what is happening is that the brain is getting those impressions back from the eye and making things of it. So if there's the orange splodges make the very slightest hint of an apple, a horse, just to give you a help with this, if you look at wallpaper, or we've got an old rug with an old pattern on it. If you look at an old pattern, we've got on this rug on the floor here, I've got a cat pushing a vacuum cleaner. Obviously it's not a cat pushing, but it's a pattern that if your eyes latch onto it and see a cat pushing a vacuum cleaner, that's always what it is. It's like those those splodgy things that psychiatrists make you look at. You eventually find pictures in there. And that's what your brain does with the splodge information that is sent back from closed eyes. Now, if it picks out a pattern, what seems to happen is it links to the construct, the concept, the archetype of that. So if there's the slightest hint of a horse or an apple, the brain picks up on it and then matches it with the archetype, which is, if you're young, it would be the apple that you remember from first grade or whatever grade school, where you're learning A for apple or H for horse, and it goes, that's a horse. And then you've got the different part of your brain. You see, you've got one part of your brain that's seeing the orange splodges at the back of your eye. Then you've got another part of your brain that sees, it thinks it can see a horse in the splodges. Then there's another part of the brain that pops up and says, I'll be useful. This is the prototype, the archetype, horse, concept, horse, that we use for horse. Is this useful? If you've been dealing with horses during the day, a memory of the horse that you've seen during the day might come up. And this is what happens, I believe, in dreams. And this is where the video kind of goes blah, because it's very hard to think of any use for this sort of information. You remember, say, the memory of Samantha or a horse of your dreams when you wake up. But that's one part of your brain's construction fed from just the spibbly bits at the back of your eye. And I believe that's the cause and effect going on, coming in from the slightest causes, which are the orange splodges at the back of the eye, causing different another part of the brain to latch on to make a pattern, and then another part of the brain to take from that pattern what it could be, drag out an archetype, and then another part of the brain say, well, you've got that archetype horse, this is the horse, and this is Samantha that was on the horse, and then do other things. Now, what we've got now will link back to the start of the video where the brain was taking in the hearing cochlear implant digital thing, garbage, and it hasn't translated that garbage into words. It's gone along and made up, probably by trial and error, something that'll make sense. It's not a random speech generator, but yeah, maybe a random speech generator we could call it, that says oh, comes in and it tries however, and eventually gets it to say oh, and then if oh seems appropriate, eventually that works. So comes in from the cochlear implant, it gets translated or from the next generator thing into oh, and that goes to another part of the brain that understands it from oh. When somebody like Mystic says oh, it becomes in the digital generator and then gets translated into oh, and then goes to another part of the brain. And so you can say that it's 5%, let's say, of decent information is the cochlear implant thing. 95% is being made up, completely made up, by the random generator translator thing to pass to another part of the brain. And there's bound to be lots of confusion as well, different steps of different parts of the brain to do this. But the thing to grab and to take to the dreams is that most or all of it is just made up from small inputs of the digital thing's trying to do it the best it can but just does it badly. When your eyes are closed, when you're sleeping, it could well be that the orange or the flashes are just going back, and they are as random as they could be, but the brain is just making sense of it through different stages. It goes, well, I can make a pattern out of that, I can make an archetype out of that, I can match that to a memory of that, and you can see from that it's just an ongoing process of different parts of the brain, because as soon as it's got Samantha on the horse, that we remember as a decent, if we're woken up, I was dreaming of Samantha on the horse, it'll be such a dreadfully bad representation of Samantha on the horse, depending how you think about it, because it's at different stages, at different parts in the brain. But the memory might latch on to what it thinks is a beautiful representation of Samantha on the... It won't be, it's just because there is no Samantha on the horse. It's kind of made up garbage. Now, did I want to finish this by saying that how this could be in the slightest bit, not important, but worthy of a video? No, I can't, not really, but I did warn you at the start. It's just another thing to say, you've got to forget this I'm sitting in a theatre with things being shown to me, because it doesn't work like that. There is not one consciousness in the brain. We're up to 19 minutes, so I won't start into consciousness. But if the video might resonate with other odd people that somehow keep a very close eye on what happens inside the brain, and it is interesting to keep an eye on it and see what does happen. I'll leave it there.